Well, good afternoon. I thought what we would try and do today is just have a roundtable discussion with three generations of leadership at Springer-Peterson. My father, Don, who's been in the industry almost 60 years, probably exceeding 60 years. I'm coming up on 40, and I think Daniel's probably approaching 25.
Yeah.
So Don Springer, Daniel Boatwright, myself, Rob Springer, we're going to talk about some of the subjects that have been a major part of our lives as we've led the company. So I thought what I would do is start off with the first subject that we chose, which was technology. And we can all think of how things have changed technology-wise, not only in our lives, but more so our company. So the first topic we had was cell phones. I don't know if that's necessarily the major what's changed, but I can think back to when I first joined the company in '86. We carried pagers, and that was my memory and recollection of communication. And we had two-way radios. When I say all the trucks, we probably had them in 3 trucks, and we had handheld radios. And then we sort of evolve into going into Nextel and so on and so forth. But that was my earliest memory, was the no cell phones. We had pagers, landlines. Everybody used you went to a pay phone if you had to call. You got a beep, a pager beeped you. It said, call the office. You went to a pay phone, called the office. And then we also, we went to the two-way radios. So I'll sort of start off with that, with conversation as far as communications. Your earliest memories.
Yeah, my earliest memory of communications in the industry was the radio. And we had it in all of our superintendent's trucks, and had a girl that basically that's all she done pretty much was man the radio back at the shop. And that's the way we communicated with all of our field people. And then, like you said, the next thing was the Nextel that I recall came available to all of us to use. And then, like you said, the pagers and the pay phones was always amazing. You always had to make sure your guys had some money so that they could call in if they had to. And then the current cell phone, which just blows me out of the water every time I see what we can do and how we're using that in our industry to better communicate with our people and our customers. It's amazing.
Yeah, Daniel, how about you? I mean, you probably were at the end of the radio part. I don't know if you ever had a pager.
Actually, I wasn't. When I started in '94, that's our only communication that we had was in the actual trucks. Was actually the CB radio that Don's talking about. We actually would basically call back to the actual office on the base station, and young lady would answer it, and we'd get a hold of somebody else there. But I did not get into the pager side of it after that. It wasn't shortly after that the Nextels came out, which obviously somewhat had pager and phone together, and the old beep beep going off all the time. And but yeah, we didn't really get into the pager side of it. It went straight from the CB radios for us to the actual Nextels. And then, it's pretty much taken off till the cell phones today. I mean, you're pretty much carrying around a mini computer, pretty much do anything you want to on a phone today. Yeah, it's been great.
Yeah, I remember the first days of mobile phones that it was a big deal because I was the sort of the operations guy, if you would, that ran our jobs. And we put in one of those mobile phones where they hardwired it into your vehicle. And it may have been one of the largest investments we made financially, because I think it was like $2,000 to hardwire a cell phone into your car. And man, did I think I had really become something, because I had that, you can't even really call it. I think we called them car phones back then. They were a car phone. And then they went to the bag phones, where you could, carry the phone around in sort of like this, I shouldn't say everybody would remember that, but the bag phones. And then we had satellite phones that I remember we had to use after the 2004 hurricanes, because Nextel got wiped out and we were using the satellite phones. So Yeah, I think just in general, when I think about how even today when we use phones, I remember when we used to send guys out, we would draw maps for them and we would print multiple copies of the maps, how to get to a job, how to get to a supplier, so on and so forth. And that was how they got places. And now everything is done, like he said, or you with the phones, that all you got to do is give them an address and they can go right into it. So amazing and I think it's benefited us. I mean, you know, you've had to change as technology's changed. So, and I think maybe going into that next, sort of the whole GPS and the mapping, and how we also use the GPS, I'm assuming the satellites for measuring roofs and what have you, but just the fact of being able to give someone an address, they can enter it into their phone, or in some cases now their vehicles. I don't know how many of our vehicles have that GPS ability. And then there's a separate side of the GPS that I think was an important thing to us about adding them to our vehicles. And I know you were with us when we did that, and we thought it was really important to do the message we'd send to our customers. So maybe talk a little bit about, remember when we did that.
Okay. Yeah, two things. One thing I forgot to mention, and I experienced this at the FRSA, one of the meetings we was at when I was president, when the fax machine came in. And what a change to the industry that was. And it amazed me that you could make a copy and instantly it should shoot it over to a contractor. So our bidding changed. Most of our GCs said, hey, you know, we don't really want to call, we want to fax. So that's why we started communicating with our general contractors back then. And then the other thing, the GPS in the vehicles, another contractor friend, that's one of the things I've always liked about this industry, being involved and talking to other contractors. You get a lot of ideas, and it betters not only your service to your customers, but your business itself. Was when we put the GPS in, was how our guys were surprised that we knew where they were all the time. And it was good for our customers, because I used to get a lot of calls from customers saying, well, you know, your guys were here, I understand that, but your bill said they was here 3 hours, and I think they was only here 30 minutes. Well, all you had to do is show them a copy of the GPS. They arrived at your residence or your business at such time, 3 hours later, they left. And a lot of the customers, when we first started doing it, I remember a couple of them would want to see a copy of that GPS when we sent the bill. And I think even Publix required that for a while, didn't they?
They did.
Yeah. So, yeah, that was a big change for the industry, I think. And it sure saved a lot of phone calls from customers complaining.
Yeah, and I think, Daniel, today you can talk about where it's evolved to, and the newest system we're just installing in our vehicles now, and what that does for our company and for our safety as well.
Yeah, it's as a GPS as the whole for us, it's done a lot of things. I mean, there was one time that if we used to use a program that we were GPS mapping at one time, our roof systems, and it used to hold a little tripod out there and basically go to each corner of the roof, and you used to be able to measure those roofs and send all that GPS signals back. And obviously things have evolved today to the point that you can basically do all that from your actual computer instead of actually having the GPS handheld system to measure roofs with. But yeah, it's pretty much come to the point that it's really taken a hold in our industry to be able to look at just the facilities and the buildings and map those buildings out with either a system called Eagle View or any type of software that you can actually use for somebody else to go in there and look at that from an estimating standpoint. So back to the trucks and the GPS currently using at this point, it has become a situation where we use the new GPS system that we're not only watching where that vehicle is at certain times during the day, it's come to the side of it that we're now being able to track what the speed limit of that vehicle is on minute by minute. Basically, whether that vehicle has accelerated levels of speed, and then the stopping numerous stop times of that vehicle, and then the side of it that they're actually tracking today with the new software is basically it's being able to create the idle time of that vehicle. And if a vehicle is sitting there too long and basically using too much fuel. So for us, it's a great tool to decide whether we're being able to, lost profits are actually coming from most of those projects, and we're using the GPS system.
Yeah, I know that the service department continues they have a big screen with all of where all their vehicles are to try and utilize that during the rainy season, who can get there quickest based on what truck is there. It's amazing to see how that's changed. And I know it's become a big benefit to us for safety on the truck GPS side. So, I think back to the, measuring roofs, you talked about it a few minutes ago. I still remember going out, and I know he does because I did it with him when I was in college. We would go out with a tape and get up on these crazy roofs and walk down to the edge of a 3-story shingle roof with a tape in your hand to try and get the dimension of a hip or a ridge or whatever it was, and how that's evolved. And then even to where now drones have become such a big part of, how we present projects, how we monitor projects. So maybe go back a little bit to the early days of how you measured roofs and then where it's evolved to now, because I think Daniel can give us a great summary on that.
Yeah, basically, like you said, we used to have the 100-foot tapes, and then I remember one day it was someplace and somebody had a meeting on the roof, and somebody showed up with one of those wheel tapes. And I thought, man, that's the neatest thing I've ever seen. So went back and bought one of those. So now, like Daniel's indicated, now all that stuff's kind of gone away. And I remember when I was still there, we was measuring roofs through the GPS system, but we would send somebody by just to check to see, what the surrounding areas look like and what kind of problems we might have setting up to do the job. So, but now I think that's even evolved to something you don't even need to do that, do you?
In most cases, you don't. When you can actually look at the facility, and it's been basically a street map system where Google Earth pretty much went around and drove their vehicles, so you can actually see the actual building itself. You're within a few inches whenever you actually measure with Google Earth today. There's many tools out there, but Google Earth, you can pretty much get any facility within a couple inches of the actual measurement. And then if you actually, we still have the practice of going by because you can't see what's in the roof system in most cases. We do core cuts and take photos on it. But you can usually get a good tell of how big the job is from Google Earth. And if somebody missed a measurement, it's quickly obtainable from Google Earth. And then if somebody says, hey, what about access to the facility? What about ways that you can actually look at it from a different perspective after you've already started estimating the project? You being able to pretty much go to a street view today, you can look in the front door of most buildings. I mean, it's crazy how much of that has been brought to the attention of you being able to go right to the computer and say, hey, I want to basically see what the side of this building looks like and what the accessibility is. And you can see all that today from sitting at your desk. So,
two amazing stories about my memories of measuring roofs. One of the very first times I went with him, we went to measure a roof of a coworker, her mother's house, and this Great Dane. We walked into the property and he said, dog won't bite, will it? Because dogs don't like me. No way that dog's gonna bite you. We hadn't walked through the gate and that dog latched onto his hand And again, he's a tough guy. I'm just telling you, this is a tough man. That dog, I mean, lit him up, full bite, blood dripping off his hand. We set the ladder up, climbed the ladder, measured the roof. Anyways, and so, yeah, I remember that about that one. And the other one was when you went out to measure that house around Lake Hollingsworth and the ladder kicked out from under you.
Yeah.
And you got taken, well, I don't even think you got taken to the hospital. You drove yourself to the hospital because you fell off the ladder and you were out measuring a roof. And you had to have been 70, I would think. Yeah. So anyways.
Wow, it's pretty brutal.
Yeah.
Huh?
Crazy things about measuring roofs. But yeah, and so much of it today is done now with satellites. And then, we talked about drones and how being able to use drones for not only marketing, but for also how we would use them for a safety aspect of where we could identify dangers and hazards and whatever. And who knows where the whole drone thing is headed. But I know it's a really added benefit for us that we've got our own drone pilot and he can get to these jobs and create great videos. So
more so from the marketing side of it, as at this point, just being able to tell the story is so much better from that type of a view. Taking a photo close up today doesn't always tell somebody what's going on. And when you're able to fly those over from an aspect of seeing what's going on in the project, seeing what the guys are doing, using it for a training situation and how a job's set up is because you can't capture something like that from Google Earth as it's being done, unless it happens to be at that point. But being able to check those things out and then use that information later down is being able to use it for training or use it for a sales tool is really great for us at this moment. So it has been a blessing to have somebody that actually has the drone license to be able to obtain all of that information.
One of the other topics that we have, and when we talked about the ability for, and I guess when we're talking about technology, communicating with our suppliers and communicating with our customers and the different entities that we work with. And I think of, for instance, National Roofing Partners, NRP, when we first came on with them as a partner and how they created this whole, I can't even remember, data port, I guess, where you'd go in, you'd get to the job site, your employees had to check in with their phone. It immediately was then communicating with the customer that, hey, the employee is there, they're on site, and then they had to check out when they left. And then that sort of became commonplace now over the last 15 years. But I remember that sort of started for us with National Roofing Partners. And then even, you mentioned the suppliers, I remember the days where you'd call and verbally go over the order with someone. They'd send you a copy of it, and then it started coming by fax, and you'd have to approve it and send it back. And now I think all that goes electronically. But you remember the days when that all first started with us with NRP, and that sort of just, even for you and I, blew our mind that our workers, who we always thought technology would just be the downfall of them, they're going to pull that phone out when they get to a job, hit some buttons and acknowledge we're on the job without making a phone call. Anyway, that was pretty interesting phase of the transition, if I remember.
Oh, I thought so too, and I was just blown away like you were when we was told that all that could happen. And I think it's really helped not being around the business as much as I used to be, but I think it's helped with our local customers, not just NRP. It's brought us to help, service like Publix, for an example. We can go to a store and send back pictures so that we can talk to somebody and get permission to go ahead and do the work while we're there. A lot of times the guys would have to take everything off the roof, come back, and we'd have to call and go over a problem. But this way you can show the problem to the customer and get approval to go ahead and do it. So I think what NRP brought to us, we've been able now to pass it on to our other customers, and it's been a real asset for for both our customers and our employees in the company, I think.
Most certainly.
Yeah, I would say probably a lot of our work orders come that way electronically now. Isn't that probably the way most of them come?
Yes. Most of it comes, electronic. Everything comes electronically for us. Typically, at this point, obviously, we try to take everything to the data forma side of it, much like what Don was just talking about, and being able to produce that information and in today's format and timestamp it. Taking a photo or putting an invoice together really helps tell the story whenever you're trying to deliver that back to the actual customer. So it certainly is working for us.
Yeah, and then I think probably one of the last ones that I have on technology, when you mentioned data forma, I think of the many different forms of software that we've implemented over the years that have really helped benefit our company. You mentioned data forma. I know Timberline Sage has been a big part of our group for probably at least 2 or 3 decades. I know that we implemented the follow-up system about 5 years ago with our salespeople, and I'm sure there's numerous others that I'm not even aware of, but you remember, as we were talking earlier, we used to get a leak call from someone, and it would be, you could tell by the tone of their voice how serious the leak was based on just the urgency in their voice. And now I think it's set up where the system comes in as a 1, 2, 3 or A, B, C or something.
Yeah, typically
the whole thing's transitioned.
Typically comes in a Sev 1, Sev 2 type situation that tells us when we need to be there and time frames that we need to be there. In most cases for the customers. But yeah, you mentioned some of the softwares. Obviously, there's the softwares that we have currently running today that certainly help us. Is About Time, timekeeping, right on the huge. Not only that, just the shuffling of paperwork that has saved internally. So, it's certainly come a long ways.
For a guy that checked timesheets every night for about 15 years, I can tell you, right. And every weekend was checking timesheets, how big of an addition that one. And obviously there's lots of them by different names, but you can remember, I know with me, when Daryl first came to see us from Data Forma, it was hard to imagine that all of this information was going to be stored and you'd be able to just go recall it without having to, as we used to say, go up in the attic and look for a job file for a job we did 5 years previous or whatever, and the changes that made even when you were there.
Oh yeah, tremendous amount of changes and so much quicker response to your customer, And like you indicated earlier, all of our orders came in by phone, and as you said too, we knew the urgency according to the voice of the customer as to how quick we needed to get there. And we always tried to get there quick. But I think that has been a major change in the way business is conducted now versus the way it was when I first got involved. A lot of the business was transmitted over a phone call. And now it seems to me like that that's one part of the industry that just doesn't happen. There's not a lot of phone calls that takes place. It used to be that was so important, was to be able to get to a phone so you could talk to a customer and kind of get a feel from them. But yeah, that's changed tremendously, I think.
Yeah, it's amazing today that you can go from a call-in, originally a call-in, and go from using email and not even talk to the customer or really hear what their issue is, to all the way to an invoice and the job is done, just because it's already went through numerous different people that are copied on an email or they have the authorization to move forward. I remember time frames where it'd take us 3 months to actually get something moving in the right direction just because it had to go through so many different signatures. With today, you're just copying everybody around. Everybody's aware of what's going on, and you can get things moving a whole lot faster. That's the thing about the actual phones and everything that I see is it allows more time frame to do more stuff. in an instant. I mean, it's just, there's so much more stuff that can actually be done in a few minutes instead of it taking so long to get something done. Look at our world today. It changes every second. I mean,
yeah, I think as a compliment to you and your leadership group today, the way that you use technology to keep advancing our company, again, you're getting a younger group of people involved, not only our field people, but the people in our office, our support people. All of them are really into whatever software we use. I feel like a dinosaur when I walk into the room, literally, how all of that is really helping us grow. And I say not just keep up with, but stay ahead of, a lot of our competition. But really, you're always looking at, hey, there's this new, or our HR director will bring something new to us as a new software that we can use or implement. Fabrication department, service department, operations, safety. Everybody's thinking about, we've talked about a lot of those items here today. But yeah, I think that the ability that you have growing up in that time of your life, that technology is just how you do it. Even transferring money. I remember when we used to have to go get money and put it in an envelope for our crews that was going out of town, and we would break it down to however much meal money they got. We'd separate the 20s and the 10s and the 5s, and we'd have it all separated out so that foreman didn't have to do anything. Now we hit a button, it wires the money electronically to a card, and they're carrying that debit card. Our guy goes, and it's amazing to me. So again, the fact that you and the group today are utilizing it and the changes that we've seen, I think you're keeping us ahead of our competition.
Thank you. Obviously, I'm caught in both worlds at this moment because I still like paper somewhat. Contracts, things like that. I like to really have my hands on things like that. Still sign them, whether it's from my iPad or DocuSign or things. But I get caught in both worlds. And I try my best to separate and go paperless. But it's just the way when I was brought up in that period. I mean, you always had something that come across that you felt like you didn't have a hold of it until you actually had the paper. And it's kind of, you still got it. It's just somewhere else that you've got stored away. And so, but you going back to your statement about the situation with the money thing, it's a wonder y'all got anything done with all the stuff that y'all actually had to do. I mean, like counting out somebody's money that they're going to need for a hotel room that's crazy.
And the bigger disaster was when they came back and we had to go over it and look at the expense report, and there was always money missing, and trying to account for all of that. So again, it's amazing how it's changed. But well, I think that pretty much wraps up the technology side. So I think that's a good ending to that topic.